I had a terrible JMT experience, and I want to save you from having the same experience I had. Let me lay it out for you. Day 1, concussion. Day 4, tore my meniscus. Day 8, food poisoning. Day 9, pooped my pants. Day 10, peeing blood. Day 12, got hit by a hurricane. Day 13, had a pretty good day. Day 14, ended the trail. Hi, I'm Katie, aka Double Dip, and I want to save you from all the late night tent cries that I had on the John Muir Trail. I have 10 tips that hopefully, if you follow them, will give you a much better experience than I had. For context, I've hiked the Colorado Trail, the John Muir Trail, the Long Trail, and the Continental Divide Trail, and I thought the John Muir Trail was the hardest of the 4. However, it also taught me the most, so let's get into it. First, let's talk about permits. Arguably the hardest part of the entire John Muir Trail is just getting the permit to start. The lottery system for southbound hikes starts months in advance and is incredibly competitive. My best advice is this: be flexible with your schedule, be flexible with your start dates, and be flexible with the direction you're willing to hike. Personally, I went northbound and started at Cottonwood Pass. This added about 50 miles to the overall trail, but it made the logistics so much easier as there are many more northbound permits and they're a lot less competitive to get. If you're set on a southbound thru hike, the lottery window starts exactly 24 weeks in advance of your start date. I would recommend setting an alarm on your phone for 168 days before your earliest wanted start date. Even if you don't win the lottery, which honestly is pretty likely, don't worry about it. Cancellations happen very often. Make a habit out of logging into your recreation.gov account at 7 o'clock in the morning Pacific time. This is typically when those canceled permits are released back to the public. I will say though, it is first come, first serve, so I'd recommend having your payment information already pre-recorded into your account so that you can just hit checkout and have that permit. If you're more okay with living on the edge than I am, Yosemite National Park does hold a limited number of permits for walk-ups. These are typically released 7 to 14 days in advance, and obviously it requires a little bit of faith that there's going to be something there when you show up, but it's a really good last-minute option if you haven't been able to secure a permit in any other way. Tip number 2 is to respect the altitude. The John Muir Trail hovers at an elevation of around 10,000 feet above sea level, so if your body is coming from sea level, you're going to have a little bit of a shock when you first hit the trail. Don't expect to rush into big miles on day 1, especially if you're starting northbound at the summit of Mount Whitney. Give your body the grace it needs to acclimate to this altitude and try to get at least 48 hours at altitude before even starting the trail. Think of altitude as a tax on your movements. At 10,000 feet, your body is operating with about 30% less effective oxygen than you would be at sea level. And if you are going northbound and starting from Whitney Portal, you're asking your body to make the jump from 18,000 feet to 14,500 feet in under 48 hours. That's pretty crazy. Once you are on the trail, there are 3 main things you can do to help mitigate the effects of the altitude. First, drink more water than you might think. When you're breathing, you're losing about double the moisture through your breath as usual, so you should probably be doubling your daily water intake. Second, make sure you follow the rule, climb high, sleep low. You're going to be going over a lot of passes at 14,000, 13,000, 12,000 feet, but try to give your body the rest it needs at these lower elevations. If you're able to camp in the dip between 2 passes, you're going to recover a lot better from the stress and be more ready to face the next day. Third is just know when to stop. If you have absolutely zero appetite, if you're struggling to sleep, or if you have a throbbing headache that's not going away with ibuprofen, you might be suffering from acute mountain sickness. This is not something you can just tough out, and you're only going to really be able to appreciate the beauty of the trail if you're healthy enough to take it in. Now let's move on to everyone's favorite thing, a bear canister. In the Sierras, a hard-sided bear canister is a legal requirement. I do understand people's frustration with the bear can. It is heavy, sometimes it doesn't fit in your pack, and the fixed volume means that it does sometimes restrict the amount of food that you're able to bring. However, there are some things you can do to make it easier to carry a bear can along with you. First is just embrace the versatility that a bear can offer. I use it to do a lot of different things. I've used it as a chair, I've used it to do trail laundry, I've used it for trail yoga and for rolling out my calves at the end of a long day. Second is to maybe prioritize the bear can when you're picking a pack for the trail. I find it to be easiest to have a pack that does fit a bear can either vertically or horizontally inside. However, if you have a pack where you must strap the bear can to the top, think about carrying an extra bag along with you to load all of your food inside the main compartment of your pack during the day. Taking all of the weight out of the bear can when it's up at the top of your pack is going to make your center of mass a lot more stable and make it easier to scramble over these high mountain passes. If you're curious about what needs to go in the bear can, it is both more complicated and more simple than you might think. Basically, if it has a scent, it goes in the bear can. This does include things like chapstick, lotion, sunscreen, and also the obvious things like your food and any drink powders. While we're on the subject of bear cans, let's move on to tip number 4, which is about resupply. Resupply on the John Muir Trail can be pretty logistically challenging. The Sierra is very remote, towns are very spread out, and it can be pretty hard to find your way into a town. Realistically, you'll be looking to resupply at 2 or more of the following locations: Red's Meadow, Vermilion Valley Resorts, Muir Trail Ranch, or Kearsarge Pass. Muir Trail Ranch and Red's Meadow are both very easy to get to, but require some logistically complicated mail drop situations, while Vermilion Valley Resort and Kearsarge Pass have more amenities, but are also further off trail and require a little bit more effort to get to. Unfortunately, the JMT isn't really a wing-it trail when it comes to resupply. The mail out there can be very slow, and so any of your mail drops do need to be arranged weeks in advance. I'd recommend sitting down, looking at your daily mileage, looking at what you're expecting to do, and figuring out your resupply well before you head out to the trail. Tip number 5 is about sun protection. At 12,000 feet, the UV is already way more intense than at sea level, and any lingering snow and all the granite out there serves as a mirror to reflect that back up into your face from the ground. Sunscreen is great, it always is, but it might not be enough for a 3-week hike. I would recommend looking at some sort of physical barrier, whether it be a long sleeve lightweight sun hoodie, a wide brimmed hat, some sort of sun umbrella, or sun glove. Of course, that doesn't mean you shouldn't bring sunscreen. First, sunscreen's great, and secondly, the JMT is known for a lot of really great swimming opportunities. I speak from unfortunate personal experience when I say that it can be very easy to lose track of time while you're in an alpine lake and end up really badly burned. Tip number 6 is to come prepared for mosquito season. Depending on the snowmelt, the mosquitoes in the Sierra can be legendary, and I don't mean that in a good way. To survive the mosquitoes, you might need a multi-layered defense. First, I think the best thing you can have in your kit is a bug net. My tramily and I actually called ourselves the lunch ladies because we would all be sitting around camp with our bug nets pulled up just to expose our mouths so we could shovel food in, and I would still end up with a little ring of mosquito bites just right around my mouth where the mosquitoes could reach. Wherever the bug net covered, though, was safe. Secondly, I would recommend applying permethrin to your clothes. Permethrin is a neurotoxin to insects that bonds to the fibers in your clothes themselves, so you can't necessarily sweat it out or get it in your eyes, unlike DEET. It is effective through many washes, and I like to joke that it creates a no-fly zone around my entire body. Finally, with mosquitoes, I would recommend understanding strategic camping. Mosquitoes are not necessarily the strongest flyers, and they hate wind. Even if they look picturesque, I might recommend avoiding those low-lying basin campsites because if you want to be there, the mosquitoes might want to be there as well. Instead, try to look for something with maybe a little bit more exposure, maybe something with slightly higher wind, and it might help keep the mosquitoes away from your campsite. The mosquitoes were pretty annoying on my thru hike of the JMT, but now let's dive into the things that made the experience honestly kind of miserable. And yes, I'm about to talk about pooping my pants. After thru hiking the Colorado Trail, I think I had a little bit of a god complex about what I was capable of, and I realized that I never used anything in my med kit. Obviously, the logical leap was for my next thru hike, I didn't really need to bring a med kit. That was a mistake. You absolutely need to have a couple of non-negotiables in your med kit. From experience, I would recommend Imodium being one of them, or any other anti-diarrheal. I'm sure I saved 2 to 3 ounces on taking out whatever I had in my med kit, but by day 12, when the diarrhea really hit, I think I would have paid $1 million for a single Imodium. Your med kit kind of is the one place that I would advocate for packing your fears. Bring the Imodium, bring the ace bandage, bring the knee brace. The Sierra is such a remote location that if shit really hits the fan, you want to have whatever you need on you. And if you don't need it, you can just be someone else's hero when you run into someone who really needs something and you can hand it to them. The rain also got to me on my hike, which brings me to point 8, which is to plan for rain. When I think about California, I think about something that's pretty dry, but that was not my experience at all. We had rain for probably 10 out of the 14 days we were on trail, including being hit by Hurricane Hillary, and I guess I didn't even realize hurricanes made it that far into California. You need 2 things for this. One is you need a good rain strategy to help you mentally, and secondly, you need an even better escape plan for if something goes really wrong. I met so many people before my hike who told me to leave my rain gear at home because I wouldn't need it, and I'm so grateful that I didn't listen to them. I basically lived in my rain jacket and rain pants for those 2 weeks. Setting aside even the safety issues of being that wet at that high of altitude for so long, mentally, I don't know how I would have handled being that soaked every day. The second thing I'm really glad I did was splurge for the Garmin Unlimited plan for my Garmin InReach. When Hurricane Hillary hit and there was a lot of confusion and a lot of stress about flash flooding within Kings Canyon, It was really nice to be able to communicate stress-free with my family without having to worry about the 50 cents per message back and forth. The accurate info was really worth the extra $20, especially because the JMT is so remote that I didn't have cell service for the entire hike. Talking about safety brings me to tip number 9, which is to respect water crossings. When you approach a high-volume water crossing in the Sierra, the most important thing you can do is check your ego. There are a few things you can do to make it a little bit safer. First, check the time. Earlier in the morning tends to be a better time to cross these really raging rivers. In the afternoon, as the temperature rises, more snowmelt does contribute to a heavier current, and if you're willing to wait overnight and let those temperatures dip, you might have less of a current to deal with. Second is to not remove your trail runners or your hiking boots. I know it can be really tempting to switch into your water crossing shoes or even go barefoot because you don't want to deal with wet feet, but all the granite at the bottom of the river is really slippery and you need that extra traction. If you fall in a lot of these really roaring rivers, it could be game over. And in that same vein, make sure you unbuckle your sternum strap and your hip belt from your pack. If you do happen to fall, you want to be able to get out of that pack really quickly. If you have something super heavy on your back that gets trapped under a log or is just holding you down with the weight of it, you don't want to have to struggle with a little clasp on your sternum strap or your hip belt as you're struggling to stand up. Finally, face upstream and use your trekking poles to maintain as many points of contact with the ground as possible. Try to lean into the current and move diagonally with it instead of trying to fight directly against it, especially if the water is a little bit higher on your body. However, even with these 4 tips, it's really important to remember that river crossings can and are fatal every single year in the Sierra. If you get to a river crossing and your gut tells you it's not safe to cross, listen to your gut. You can always turn around, head into a town, wait a few days, let the river die down a little bit. You can look at your map and find an alternate crossing. You can try to move up or downstream to find a place that's a little bit safer to cross. It might be an inconvenience, but I promise you it is not worth your life. The 10th and final tip is a little bit more of a fun one, and that's to find your purpose out there, even if it's spite. When you're through hiking, you might need a motive a little bit deeper than hiking is fun, because I promise you, when it's day 12 and you're puking next to a pine tree, hiking is not fun. I would like to say that in my lowest moments, I thought about what I was gaining from being out in the serenity of nature, or what I was gaining from the love of adventure, but really, I was just thinking about people back home who I thought would be a little bit smugly satisfied if I had to quit a trail. I do kind of honestly think that I stayed on the trail because I refused to give them that win, even if that win was just completely in my head. So if your reason is spiritual clarity or the love of adventure or reflecting on haters back home, I would recommend finding a good reason to stay on trail even when it feels like the trail is out to get you. Was my John Muir Trail experience fun? No, probably not in the way that any normal person would have described it. But it is something that I'm so incredibly proud of finishing to this day. I wanted to come home and have all of these really wonderful stories to share with my friends and family about how beautiful those mountains are, because they are beautiful. But honestly, I just remember the times that I was crying in my tent because I was so afraid that I was peeing blood and didn't have cell service to look up if that meant I was gonna die or not. Would I go back and do it again if I was promised the exact same experience? Absolutely not. But I do really want to get out there at some point in my life and have a little redemption tour. The trail is so wonderful, and even in the middle of all of my vomiting and pooping and crying and peeing blood, I was able to recognize how beautiful the trail was. I do think a lot of my negative experience boiled down to some bad luck. The weather was really bad, and I don't know to this day what gave me such bad food poisoning. However, if I could have done anything different, I probably would have built in about 2 extra days. I think when things got really bad, if I could have just hopped off trail, headed into a town, and just sat in a hotel bathroom for a few days, I would have felt a lot better. Instead, I had such a tight timeline, and I had to keep hiking, and I had to keep averaging my daily mileage, and that meant that I had to hike through some pretty awful moments. I'm hopeful that these 10 tips might help you avoid the disaster that my JMT thru hike was, and instead make it the dream trip that you're probably expecting. If you've hiked the JMT before and you've survived the Sierra Mosquitoes and all of the ups and downs of the passes, definitely drop me a comment if you think I've forgotten anything. I hope to see you out there, hopefully with 2 functioning knees and a healthy digestive system. Happy trails!